There's a moment in life where you finally understand that your peace is more valuable than your pride. You stop arguing to be understood. You stop defending what God already settled. And instead of reacting, you choose to respond with silence, with grace, with trust. You walk away not because you're weak, but because you're wise, because you know what's not yours to carry. Staying calm doesn't mean you don't feel the storm. It means you've learned to anchor yourself in the middle of it. It means you've been through enough to know that panicking never brought you peace. Worrying never worked. You've exhausted your tears, your explanations, your strength. And now you rest in the truth that if it's too big for you, it's just right for God. You were never designed to fight every battle. You were designed to discern, to know when to speak and when to be still, when to stand and when to kneel. There is power in knowing that your silence is not surrender, it's strategy. That while they expect you to break, you bloom. While they wait for your response, you rise above it. Because what they didn't count on is that your calm is rooted in a kingdom, not in chaos. Sometimes the enemy tries to shake what he can't break. He tries to distract what he can't destroy. But when you remain calm and unbothered, you send a message. This battle isn't mine. I'm covered. I'm protected. And I've placed it in the hands of the only one who has never lost a fight. You see, the enemy feeds off your reaction. That's why he sends drama, lies, confusion. Because if he can't touch your future, he'll try to ruin your focus. But what happens when you stop feeding the noise? What happens when you stop explaining your growth to people who are committed to misunderstanding it? What happens when you sit back, cross your arms in peace and whisper, God's got this? You shift atmospheres, you break patterns, you teach the storm to respect your stillness. Let them think you're too quiet. Let them assume you're passive, but the truth is, you've just outgrown the noise. You've seen what God can do when you stop interfering, when you stop trying to be your own rescue, and now you're learning that rest is resistance. Peace is warfare, silence is sacred. Don't let them pull you into battles that God already called finished. Don't let them drag you back into places he delivered you from. If they knew the cost of your calm, they'd never question it. If they saw the depth of your trust, they'd understand why you don't flinch anymore. You've cried enough. You've wrestled enough. Now it's time to rest and release. It's time to say, God, I trust you with the things I can't fix. I trust you with the people I can't change. I trust you with the timing I can't control. Because you're not alone in this. Heaven backs you. Grace carries you, favor surrounds you, and even when your hands are empty, your heart is full of hope, full of faith, full of quiet strength. Stay calm, stay unbothered, let them talk, let it unfold. But don't lose your peace, don't lower your voice, don't move out of character. Let God handle what you can't, and watch him work in ways that silence every voice that ever doubted you. Peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of strength in the midst of it. When you walk into a room and refuse to let the atmosphere shake your spirit, you're not being passive, you're being powerful. In a world that celebrates loud responses and quick comebacks, choosing to remain still is not weakness, it's wisdom. Peace becomes your weapon, your armor, your strategy. It becomes the thing that keeps your heart steady while the world tries to make it race. You learn that not every storm is yours to chase, not every argument is yours to win. And not every attack requires a reaction. The more you grow, the more you realize that peace is a choice, a daily decision to protect your mind, your energy, and your assignment. There's something sacred about a soul that refuses to be shaken. You stop needing to prove your point because you understand that your purpose speaks louder than your words. You stop chasing validation because you're grounded in truth. You start recognizing the setups disguised as conversations and the distractions dressed as concerns. And instead of engaging, you stand firm in peace because you know that anything sent to disturb your spirit is not from God. You stop fighting battles that were never yours to begin with, and you let your silence speak louder than your defense. There is a maturity that comes with choosing peace. It's not about pretending the chaos doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let it live in you. This kind of peace is not a performance. It's a posture. It's not about acting like you have it all together. It's about trusting that even when things feel like they're falling apart, there's a divine hand holding everything in place. You learn how to sit in the middle of the unknown and breathe deeply. You learn how to walk through rejection and still keep your head lifted. You learn how to say less and pray more, and every time you choose peace over panic, heaven celebrates your growth. You're not ignoring reality, or just not giving it authority. You're not denying the facts, you're just declaring your faith. People may not understand it. They may wonder why you're not reacting, why you're not fighting back, why you're not proving your worth. But that's because they haven't seen what you've survived. They don't know the cost of your calm. They don't know how many nights you had to wrestle to find rest. They don't know how many tears it took to learn how to be still. Your peace didn't come cheap, and now you protect it like the treasure it is. Because when you finally learn how to be calm in the face of chaos, you realize that your peace is not a feeling. It's a force. It's not soft, it's strong. It's not lazy. It's intentional. It takes work to remain still when everything around you demands a reaction. You begin to understand that the enemy's real strategy isn't just destruction, it's distraction. If he can't take your calling, he'll try to take your calm. If he can't touch your anointing, he'll try to shake your focus. But you get wiser, you start seeing the pattern, you start discerning the triggers. You notice how the attacks show up right before elevation. You notice how the enemy always uses the same voices, the same moments, the same tactics. And instead of falling into the trap, you learn to pause, you learn to breathe, you learn to whisper to your soul, be still. Because peace is your response now, not because you don't have the fire to fight, but because you know when to burn and when to rest. You're not the same person you used to be, the one who needed to clap back, who needed to be heard, who needed to explain herself. Growth taught you that silence is a sentence, that peace is a statement. That stillness can be stronger than any shout. You're not unbothered because you're numb. You're unbothered because you're anchored. Anchored in grace, anchored in wisdom, anchored in divine trust. And every time life tries to knock you off center, you return to your anchor. You return to your truth. You return to your peace. It's your weapon, your witness, your covering. There's a kind of warfare that doesn't require noise. There's a kind of victory that comes from stillness. And you're learning how to tap into that. You're learning how to let the storm rage without letting it rage in you. You're learning how to carry yourself with confidence, even when your circumstances are uncertain. You're learning how to let go of control, how to surrender outcomes, how to trust the timing even when it's not comfortable. Peace becomes your compass, guiding you through moments that used to unravel you. And instead of running in circles trying to fix what's broken, you walk in peace knowing that whatever you can't fix, God already has a plan for. Surrender is not about giving up, it's about giving over. It's the moment you admit to yourself that carrying the weight of the world was never your assignment. It's when you realize that your hands were never meant to hold what only heaven can handle, and so you unclench your fists, you stop wrestling with what you cannot fix, and you choose to release. Not because you're out of options, but because you're finally seeing that trying to control what's beyond your reach is costing you your peace, your joy, and your focus. When you release what's too heavy, you make space for what's holy. When you surrender what's uncertain, you make room for what's divine. This is where transformation begins, not in the striving, but in the stillness of surrender. There is strength in admitting that you're not strong enough on your own. That no matter how many plans you make, how many times you try to force it, how many hours you spend overthinking and overdoing, it still doesn't move the way you hoped, and maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe the delay is not a denial but a redirection. Maybe your control was never the solution, it was the problem, and in that realization you step back. You step down from trying to be your own savior, your own way, maker, your own defender. You let go not out of fear but out of faith, out of deep-rooted, soul-anchored belief that what you release to God, He doesn't drop, that what you place in His hands, He doesn't mishandle, that when you surrender, you're not losing, you're being led. Letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. There's a sacred rhythm to surrender that can't be explained to those still addicted to control. You stop trying to manage the opinions of others, the outcomes of situations, the timing of promises. And in that space, God begins to move. You begin to breathe again. You begin to rest again. You begin to trust again, because faith isn't tested in what you can control. It's proven in what you can't. You discover that peace comes not from the certainty of the outcome, but from the certainty of the one you trust to handle it. And while everything around you may still look the same, something within you changes. You're no longer chasing clarity. You're choosing confidence. You're no longer desperate for answers. You're anchored in assurance. There are things in your life that were never meant to be solved. They were meant to be surrendered. Relationships you tried to fix, but God asked you to release. Doors you tried to open, but God chose to shut. Seasons you tried to extend, but God was already calling you into something new. And every time you held on tighter, things slipped further away. Because you weren't meant to force what's not in alignment with your destiny. You weren't meant to fix what only God can restore. And the more you tried to hold it together, the more things unraveled. Until finally you reached the end of yourself, and that's where God was waiting. Not at your beginning, not in your strength, but in your surrender. Some of the greatest breakthroughs don't come when you fight harder. They come when you kneel lower. When you get tired of carrying the same worry to bed every night. When you stop rereading the same chapter hoping it will end differently. When you stop rehearsing the same pain looking for a different kind of closure. You put it down. You say, God, I've done all I can do. You say, God, this burden is too big for me. You say, God, I trust you with the part I cannot reach. And in that moment, peace enters. Maybe not instantly, maybe not loudly, but deeply. It settles into the places that panic once lived. It fills the cracks that control once held together. And you realize that surrender is not a moment. It's a lifestyle. Each day becomes a new opportunity to release again. To hand over the anxiety, the timeline, the outcome. Each day becomes another chance to say, I trust you even when I can't trace you. I trust you even when the path is unclear. I trust you even when my plans fall apart. And it's in that trust that you're lifted, you're renewed, you're reminded that you were never called to be everything for everyone, that you were never assigned to fix what only grace can mend, that your role was never savior, it was servant, vessel, believer. And when you operate in that role, the pressure lifts, the panic fades, and peace becomes your portion. So you stop praying for control and you start praying for courage. Courage to surrender the fear. Courage to release the timeline. Courage to accept that God's no is just as loving as his yes. You stop begging for answers and start building your faith. You stop chasing approval and start resting in purpose. You lay down your plans and pick up his promises, and while the world may look at you and see someone who's given up, you know better. You know that surrender is where your real strength begins. You know that peace is what God gives when your hands are no longer full of what you were never meant to carry. You know that in surrender, you find freedom. In surrender, you find clarity. In surrender, you finally find rest. Responding instead of reacting is one of the most powerful shifts you can ever make in your spiritual and emotional journey. There's a difference between reacting from a place of fear and insecurity and responding from a place of wisdom and discernment. When you react, it's immediate, it's loud, it's raw, it's usually driven by emotion and shaped by triggers that haven't healed yet. But when you respond, it's intentional, it's thoughtful, it's rooted in truth, not trauma. Growth shows up in the pause between what happened and how you choose to handle it. That pause is sacred. That pause is strength. That pause is proof that your peace now runs deeper than your pain ever did. You begin to learn that not everything deserves a reaction. That not every offense needs to be addressed. That not every lie needs to be corrected. When you start growing in who you are, you stop shrinking to meet the level of petty people. You stop explaining your peace to people who only understand chaos. You stop justifying your silence to people who mistake it for weakness. There's a weight that lifts off your life when you understand that your dignity is more valuable than your defense. You choose not to clap back, not because you couldn't, but because you know that every battle has a price and your energy is too expensive to spend on things that don't align with your purpose. People will test your patience. Circumstances will push your buttons. The enemy will whisper lies, stir confusion, and provoke your flesh. But that's when you learn the art of spiritual stillness. That's when you lean into the voice of wisdom and not the sound of war. That's when you tell yourself, I don't have to show up to every argument I'm invited to. That's when you know that your peace is not just for you, it's for the room you're called to influence. You can't bring healing if you're always bleeding. You can't speak life if you're always drained. You can't walk in purpose if you're always pulled into distractions. Responding means you're clear on your assignment and unmoved by unnecessary noise. When you react, you hand over your power. You let your emotions lead. You say things you didn't mean. You do things you later regret, and then you carry the weight of those reactions like chains. But when you respond, you reclaim your authority. You protect your peace. You remind yourself that silence is sometimes the most anointed answer you can give. It takes more strength to be still than it does to lash out. It takes more maturity to walk away than it does to prove a point. Your power is not in your volume, it's in your vision. You know where you're going, and that means you can't afford to be distracted by everything trying to pull you backward. This kind of maturity isn't natural. It's developed. It's built in dark seasons, in silent nights, in moments where you wanted to react but chose to wait. It's developed in prayer, in quiet surrender, in deep reflection. It's shaped when you realize that God fights for you better than you ever could. That vengeance doesn't belong in your hands. That sometimes your only assignment is to stay seated and trust that what's happening is bigger than what you see. When you respond instead of react, you're saying, I believe God is still in control. I don't need to fix this. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to match their energy. I've got peace, and that's my response. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you're breaking cycles. You're ending patterns that have kept your family in chaos for generations. You're refusing to let trauma dictate your tone. You're rewriting the story with wisdom, not wounds. People may wonder why you're so calm, why you're not defending yourself, why you're not angry like you used to be. But that's because they don't know what it took to get here. They didn't see the nights you cried yourself to sleep. They didn't witness the prayers that birthed your peace. They didn't watch you wrestle your flesh into submission so your spirit could rise. You're not calm because it doesn't hurt. You're calm because you've healed enough to not be owned by the hurt. You're not silent because you don't have words. You're silent because your words are now weapons of healing, not harm. You're not unbothered because you don't care. You're unbothered because you've cast your cares. You've learned that wisdom waits. That maturity pauses. That grace chooses a higher road. And in that, you gain something more valuable than the satisfaction of a reaction. You gain the security of knowing that nothing and no one can pull you out of character unless you let them. Every moment you choose peace over panic, you train your soul to stay rooted. You grow stronger, you rise higher, you see clearer, and you begin to notice how much more fulfilling it is to respond with grace than to react out of pain. You notice how God steps in more quickly when you step back. You realize that things work out better when you don't force them, that peace does more in silence than anger ever could in noise, that growth isn't loud, it's quiet, it's in the pause, it's in the breath you take before deciding who you really are and who you refuse to be again. You learn to let that breath speak for you, you learn to let peace go ahead of you, you learn that response is no longer a reaction. It's a reflection of who you've become. Faith isn't always loud, sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, sometimes it just shows up. It's not always about bold declarations and public victories. Sometimes faith looks like getting out of bed when your heart is heavy. Sometimes it looks like showing up with a smile when you're still carrying yesterday's tears. Sometimes faith is quiet obedience, silent trust, and still resilience. It's not always pretty, but it's always powerful. It grows best when there's nothing left to hold on to except a promise that hasn't shown up yet. And in those moments when everything inside of you wants to control, fix, or figure it out, faith says, be still, let God handle it. There's something sacred about trusting God in the dark. When nothing makes sense, when doors are closing, when the road gets quiet and your prayers feel like they're echoing back empty, that's the place where real faith is born, not in the comfort of certainty, but in the discomfort of surrender. When you have to trust that God sees what you can't, knows what you don't, and is working while you're waiting. That's not easy faith. That's not comfortable faith. That's the kind of faith that's built with tears, fought for with silence, and refined through fire. It's not the faith you perform, it's the faith that anchors you when everything else is shaking. You begin to understand that walking by faith means releasing your need to control the outcome. It means standing on a promise when all the evidence says otherwise. It means believing that delays are not denials and silence is not absence. It means knowing that even if it doesn't look how you imagined, God is still doing something intentional behind the scenes. And every day you wake up and choose to trust again, to believe again, to keep walking when you don't see the path clearly. That's faith, that's power, that's growth. People often think that faith is about having all the answers, but real faith is about learning to live with questions and still choosing trust. It's about being okay with not knowing the plan and still saying yes. It's about worshiping while you wait, praising while you process, believing while you're breaking, because somewhere deep inside you know that God has never failed you before and He's not going to start now. That even when you feel forgotten, you are still held. That even when things feel delayed, they are not denied. That even when you don't understand, you are still seen. Faith is what keeps you calm in chaos. It's what allows you to walk through uncertainty with a grounded heart. It's what keeps your mind from spiraling when circumstances shift without warning. It teaches you how to live from a place of expectation, even when there's no physical proof. It teaches you how to prepare like it's already done, how to thank God like it's already arrived, how to show up like the breakthrough is around the corner. Because even if you don't see it yet, you know it's coming. That's what faith does. It positions your heart in alignment with heaven, even when earth gives you every reason to quit. You learn how to carry faith through disappointment. You learn how to still believe when the door closes. You learn how to trust again after the heartbreak, the setback, the silence. You understand that faith doesn't erase the pain. It just refuses to let the pain dictate your next move. You can cry and still believe. You can feel discouraged and still move forward. You can be tired and still say, I'm trusting you. Because faith isn't a feeling, it's a decision, a daily choice to lean not on your own understanding, but on God's character, His record, His word. Every step you take in faith is a seed being planted. It may not bloom today, it may not bloom tomorrow, but it's growing underground. It's developing roots. It's getting stronger, even when you can't see it. And one day, suddenly, what you've been waiting for will rise up through the soil of your obedience. Not because you forced it, but because you were faithful. Not because you figured it out, but because you trusted God too. And when that moment comes, you'll realize it was never about the outcome. It was about who you became while you waited. Faith shapes your character. It deepens your discernment. It sharpens your vision. It teaches you how to walk differently, speak differently, love differently. You stop looking for shortcuts because you understand that God's timing is just as perfect as His promise. You stop chasing what's not yours because you trust that what is for you will find you. You stop settling for what's familiar because you're focused on what's divine. That's what faith does. It elevates your posture even when your circumstances are low. There will be moments where everything in you wants to give up. Where doubt tries to drown you, where fear screams louder than hope, but faith whispers louder. Faith says you've come too far. Faith says the same God who started this will finish it. Faith says your story is not over. And so you keep showing up, you keep praying, you keep trusting, not because it's easy, but because you've seen what happens when you let God handle what you can't. Faith teaches you to stop chasing control and start choosing peace. Faith reminds you that rest is not laziness. It's confidence in the one who never sleeps. Faith says you don't have to know the way when you know the one who leads the way. When life gets loud, when your heart is heavy, and when your hands feel too weak to hold it all together, there is power in choosing calm over chaos. There is strength in being unbothered, not because you don't care, but because you've learned to cast your cares on the one who cares for you. You've come to understand that peace is not found in control, but in surrender, that stillness is not weakness, it's strategy, that when you let go of what's too big for you, God begins to do what only He can. You've learned to pause before reacting, to release before controlling, and to trust before you see the outcome. That kind of maturity doesn't come easy. It comes through the pressing, the breaking, the waiting, and the stretching. But through it all, your posture has shifted. You no longer chase validation, fight for control, or settle for anxiety. You stay calm, you remain grounded, you become unshakable, because you know who you belong to, and you trust Him to handle what's out of your hands. This isn't passive faith, it's powerful faith. This is the kind of quiet strength that heaven honors, so stand still, stay focused. Let God be God. And while the world may not understand how you're so calm in the middle of the storm, you'll know it's because peace has become your response and surrender has become your weapon.